Now, it's not a particularly nice morning out there, but I'm delighted to say that Esther Krakue has joined us in our huge studio overlooking the Thames and the whole city of London. Esther, very warm welcome to this studio for the first time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming in. I mean, it is an amazing place, isn't it? When you look out that window, you feel as though all's right with the world.
Yeah.
Even though it's not, really. But Donald Trump, let's start with him, because last night I couldn't believe the kind of the theatre of just watching him coming out, getting into Marine One, you know, flying all the way across the skyline of Washington, and like you could hear the whining and the wailing of the lefties, you know, going, "Oh my God," you know, because they couldn't quite decide whether they wanted him to die or they wanted him to somehow emerge as a much less strong individual. I'd said on Friday, he's definitely going to make this work to his advantage, and that's what he's done.
Yeah, and you know, I said the media was setting themselves up, because if you exaggerate his condition, you give him more of like a Herculean, I suppose, comeback, and that's exactly what you don't want to do, because Trump will feed off the theatre. That is exactly how he is, and you know, I have said I'm not necessarily fond of his antics. Like for me, he's a bit of an unsavory character, but he gets it. Yeah, he gets how to play the media. Yeah,
he works it. I mean, as you saw, he then, you know, he gets off the helicopter with the mask on. The helicopter then sort of sits there, kind of purring as he walks up the steps. He then gets to the top of the steps, the helicopter leaves, and he rips off the mask as if he's kind of some superhero.
Yeah, Superman. And then he tweets, "Don't fear the COVID."
Right. It's like "Don't Fear the Reaper," which is a Blue Oyster Cult song way before your time, I'm sure. But I mean, the other thing, and you're quite right to say that they made it easier for him to look stronger, because they wanted him to be sicker. Yeah. You know, they wanted him to be on a ventilator. They wanted him to be in some way, you know, debilitated.
Like, a bit like Boris's condition.
Yeah, and of course, you know, now it's very difficult for Joe Biden, because he's now looking at a situation where he can't really start attacking Trump again.
Imagine if he got COVID. Yeah. Like that, I would generally be scared of, but you know, someone like Trump getting COVID, you know, he I mean, he's not the picture of health, but he's a pretty fit guy. He's quite energetic, and I think because of the way he's taking care of himself, I didn't really expect him to sort of, you know, be really affected by it. And you know, there is a 99.9% survival rate.
Yes, it is absolutely extraordinary. But let's talk about his abilities as well in the sort of the polling, because you know, lots of people saying, "Oh, the polls are showing Biden's way ahead." Well, I pay very little attention to polls, but also everybody assumes that all minorities vote for Joe Biden, but they don't. In America, there's quite a substantial black vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are not actually going to be very vocal about who they vote for in this election. I genuinely believe that, because that's exactly what happened in 2016. I mean, every single poll said Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance of winning. Yeah. You know, no one even considered the idea that there might be these sort of kamikaze clandestine voters. And actually, there's some worrying polls that show that he's gaining a lot in sort of black communities and Hispanic communities in the US. So I personally think the polls are all over the place, but I wouldn't be surprised if he picked up a huge swath of, you know,
well, it takes us again, doesn't it, into this territory where he's been talking before about the Portlands of this world, Seattle, places where there's been serious inner city turmoil.
Yeah, all Democrat run.
All Democrat run, but also in black neighborhoods. You know, an awful lot of black neighborhoods have been torched, because inner city America, as I know very well, having lived there, is full of black communities. You know, they don't tend to live very much in the suburbs. They tend to live more in the inner cities, and so it's their businesses that are getting demolished and burnt to the ground. And as Seb Gorka, who's coming on later on in the show, said to us earlier, you know, an awful lot of the people who have been killed as a result of this violence have been from the black community.
Yeah, and I think one thing he's doing, which I suppose enrages a certain group of people, is he's not necessarily trying to paint a different picture, but he's giving different perspectives based on certain facts. So, for instance, you know, painting all the police in this area and the inner city areas as racist, or, you know, systemically racist or violent or whatever. A lot of these police officers in inner city communities are actually of minority backgrounds. Right. So it's not just white on black violence, you know, black people being rounded up. It's areas that actually need more policing, and with the police forces that are already in these areas, they tend to be of minority communities. They tend to reflect the neighborhoods that they're in. So it's a completely different perspective. I do still think there is an issue with police brutality, but I think it's far more you know, far-reaching than that, and I don't think it's necessarily systemic against one. One
also, people
group.
Don't really understand America in this country, by and large. You know, the politics of American inner cities is very different. The politics of the way states are run is very different. The police are very different. It's a very much more violent...
Even their accountability systems. In the UK, it's completely different. And in the US, you know, I know a lot of police forces are actually underfunded. So you'd think the last thing they would think of is putting money towards better accountability systems, right? So people don't understand it at all. So to compare the two, the UK police force and the US police force is just completely ridiculous.
But what we've also seen over the course of the summer has been that kind of influx of what we call the Antifa Brigade, you know, many of whom are from white communities. And we've seen black communities having a go at them saying, look, you know, don't spray paint your slogans in our town.
Yeah.
We don't want you supporting Black Lives Matter. We don't support Black Lives Matter. Just because I'm black doesn't mean that I believe in the other guy who happens to be black.
Yeah, and it's so exhausting. You know, 5 years ago I was just a black person, and now being black has all these expectations on you.
Right.
And for me, that's the most exhausting bit. The fact that I'm just not being left alone to be at peace and to think independently.
Right.
You know, regardless of my skin
and that
color.
you somehow need a helping hand from me. I mean, as if you do. I mean, you don't. You're a very intelligent, you know, well-educated woman. It doesn't really matter to me whether you're black or white. I mean, it makes no difference to me. But people are now making it sort of almost...
It's a movement.
Yeah,
now being black is a
movement.
Political movement.
Yeah.
And for me, it's exhausting because I want to kind of move through the world like a kamikaze.
Yeah, right. It's, you know, it's kind of condescending, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this idea, like we've had the whole Sainsbury's row going on this week. You know, let's create a safe space so that you can talk to other people.
Ridiculous.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need a safe space, do you?
No, but if I wanted to talk to other people, I just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I don't understand why I need a safe space in places like Sainsbury's. And people don't understand. What I find patronizing is not these safe spaces. It's the fact that people are actually convinced that businesses like this care.
Yeah.
Businesses don't do anything unless it contributes to their bottom line. They're not doing anything that they don't think is going to come out in profit later on down the line.
I mean, maybe if they changed their recruitment process and actually hired more black people, or maybe if they even had some black representation on their board of directors.
Exactly.
That would be nice. But otherwise, it's just virtue signaling, isn't it?
Exactly, and this is what I don't want people to buy into. I don't want you to think that just because a business is putting out this statement that they care about you, or everything is about profit, which it should be.
Right.
That's how a business should be run. I don't really want my ice cream yelling at the Home Secretary.
Right. No,
that's ridiculous.
And the Home Secretary, by the way, who may or may not come from an ethnic minority.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing that I find amazing. And we have probably got the most diverse cabinet. And, you know, and at the moment...
it's still not good enough.
You know, it's still not good enough. It's still not good enough for the Labour Party. It's certainly not good enough for the lefties who think the Labour Party have now betrayed them as well.
Yeah.
And it seems to me we've reached this very nonsensical place. I mean, can you see any of this ever changing? Because I can't.
I try to stay optimistic. At the end of the day, sometimes I just want to run away from it all. I just want to be like, leave me alone.
Right.
Stop. You know, I saw something on Twitter today about this guy saying he wants to be a better, you know, white ally or something. I'm just like, how did I get to this point in my life? Sometimes I can't even believe it.
Right.
But, you know, I do try and stay optimistic. At the end of the day, like I always say, I'm not going to be bullied into thinking a certain way or, you know, going against something that goes against my value. You know.
Because you get criticised a lot on social media, don't you? By other black people who think that you're somehow betraying what it is that is the movement.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's this is another thing that comes from the word BAME, you know, basically meshing together all non-white people, which surprisingly leaves out Eastern Europeans. I don't know where they fit in all this discourse of racial discussions in the UK, because they're a significant community. But anyway, that's
well, I wonder about that as well, because does Black Lives Matter care about all minorities, or do you have to be black? I'm not sure. Yeah,
exactly.
You know?
And how did white privilege help people that grew up in the Soviet era?
Right.
You know, how did that work?
Exactly right. And the same with the immigration argument. I mean, Nigel Farage always says to me, you know, I'm not racist in any way, shape or form. It's not about people coming here from other countries whose skin happens to not be white, because there's plenty of people coming to this country whose skin is white. He just doesn't want uncontrolled mass migration
to a tiny island.
To a small island.
And I always put the argument, why should a Ghanaian doctor be looked over a Polish bricklayer?
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't make an argument against that, because they shouldn't.
No.
It depends on the needs of the economy, and that we should definitely have, you know, rights over that.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, let's talk about The Guardian, my favourite newspaper.
God, yeah.
Now, I'm going to refrain from tearing it up, because it doesn't appear to be actually in the main paper, right? But they've put out today on their website the top 100 great black Britons, okay? Now, I don't know what you think of Dawn Butler, he said, knowing perfectly well what you think of Dawn Butler. But she makes the list, and Sir Trevor MacDonald, who is one of the great iconic figures of British life, regardless of his colour, he doesn't make the list.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, there are quite a few people in that list that confuses me, because for someone like, for instance, okay, I'm not Dawn Butler's biggest fan, I will admit. And it's ironic because she wasn't like a topic of conversation for me prior to this whole, you know, police racial profiling.
The driving through Hackney
exactly.
situation,
I had never even mentioned her name, so it's not a personal thing. But someone like Diane Abbott is the first black female MP. That would make sense. That's a commendable achievement.
Yeah.
Right? Someone like Lord Boateng would make sense.
Yes, who's also not in the list, by the way.
Exactly. But someone like Dawn Butler, I mean, I would like to know the reason. Why? What exactly has she done? Because her constituency is not very well run. Yeah. And I know because I have family that live in her constituency.
Right. I would imagine that when they put together these lists, they're sitting in a room and they're going, oh, we better put her in because, you know, there'll be trouble if we don't. You know, if we
Vogue featured her as well, so I guess that might be it.
Yeah, exactly right. No space as well for Ainsley Harriott, who is, again, one of Great Britain's kind of, you know, national treasures practically. I mean, he's a great guy. I've had him on the show before. He's hilarious. Yeah. He's funny on television. He's the most enthusiastic chef you've ever seen in your life. Why would you not put him in there?
Yeah. And, you know, I hate it when people say, oh, you know, the right or the left always complain about everything, right? But there's clearly a political bias here. Come on. I mean, if you're going to make a list about the 100 great, like, you know, great black figures in the UK, it's not overstepping to say why isn't Lord Boateng in that list or why isn't Diana, who I'm not a fan of. I'm not fond of her politics, but she's a commendable figure just by virtue of being who she is.
This is the difference between, I think, the left and the right. You know, the right are capable of understanding that you might not like someone, but you recognise that they've achieved something, and therefore you would welcome that. You know, in the same way that Julie Hartley-Brewer was reminding me when they did a poll of the top 100 most important women in British history. Margaret Thatcher didn't make the list.
Obscene.
And you go, what?
The
really?
First black,
three-term prime minister, first female prime minister, one of the first and most important female education ministers of all time. I mean, just incredible. And also Trevor Phillips. You know, Trevor Phillips, who is a giant of an intellectual, I suppose you might say, but he doesn't read from the same narratives. They don't like him.
Yeah. That's what I mean. There's clearly a political, you know, bias here. And I wouldn't have even, to be honest, if you hadn't said it, I wouldn't have noticed. Because I wouldn't have gone through the list. Because I'm just thinking, it's The Guardian.
Well, I'm going to say I'm thankful for Dr. Rakiba San, who's another guest on the show, who actually posted this so that I was able to see it before anybody else. And I was able to retweet it. But, you know, I just do worry that we live in this kind of glass house. And lots of people are outside with stones. Nobody's really sure. And the worry I've got is that we'll all end up just with no windows. Because everybody's house will be smashed.
Or everyone's too scared to say their opinions. I mean, I think for me, my biggest issue is I don't want anyone, regardless of their skin color, to think that just because a narrative is being put out there, it's the truth, or because someone is saying, you know, Black Lives Matter, they actually care about you, or they've gone past putting a black square on their social media or something like that. You know, I want people to do their own research and to think independently. Whether they end up agreeing with me or not, that is irrelevant. But that, I think, is what we need to be able to actually have, you know, fruitful conversations.
Of course, because you've had a fascinating year in a way, because, I mean, I guess,
to say the
I don't know, even this time last year, I don't think I knew who you were.
Yeah.
But you've got this big media profile now. You're regularly on Twitter, getting into it on one subject or another, some of which may or may not be racy. And it's been fascinating watching how you've kind of come to be as an individual and as a commentator, and your work with Turning Point as well. So, I mean, where does it go, do you think, from here? What do you do next?
Well, I'm definitely, you know, trying to focus on writing a bit more. I think that's something that, you know, is never going to die. But just seeing where things take me. I'm only 24. I wasn't expecting any of this. I didn't even think anyone read my Twitter, to be honest. I just thought I was talking at the wall.
Yeah, I think I noticed it at some point a few months back. I can't remember how many months back now, because this year has literally kind
exploded.
Of concertinaed. When people say, oh yeah, that happened in, you know, January, I think it happened about 3 weeks ago. And another times, you know, this time last year when we were sitting down in Westminster waiting for the stalemate on Brexit to break and to give us something to do, it seems like an age away. It seems literally like a decade ago.
I mean, I mean, well, the year is almost ending.
Yeah. And I mean, you obviously come from a family which is widespread across the world. You haven't presumably seen any of them. Yeah. As I've got the same problem. I got, you know, family in America, family in the Middle East. Yeah. You know, it's a very bizarre time to be alive.
Yeah, but I think this is why I'm hoping things look up in December. This is why I'm hoping Boris doesn't keep this ridiculous...
Christmas is coming.
Oh my gosh, I hope he just doesn't ruin Christmas, honestly. Because we've gone from flattening the curve to... Oh, I don't even know where we're at now.
I don't.
I mean,
we're now the Saudi Arabia of wind.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is slightly worrying.
And we've ground our economy to a halt for what we now know is a flu with a 99.9 plus survival rate for most people.
For most people, exactly right. Well, we shall see. Esther, lovely to see you.
Thank
you
so
for coming all this
me.
way in. We'll probably get you back on Plank of the Week soon. We'll see you same time next week as well. Esther Krakue, another regular joining the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, the home of common sense, the only place to hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.